Dr. Eleni Papamihil. I am a professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. My specialty is education, and I teach teachers who want to teach English.
How are you?
Fine, Farina, how are you?
I'm also fine, ma'am. This is Farina, a ninth grade student. I am from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. Here my question is, what is the best way to teach English?
So there are many people who have many different opinions about the best way to teach English. So I teach my students that the best way to teach English is through a way called communicative, which means that the students are using English to read about things, to talk about things that are important to them. So if I'm going to teach my students English, I need to find out what things they want to talk about. And if I find something that they want to talk about and that they want to study, then it's easier for me to motivate them to learn the language.
Oh, so Subramanian Srinivas, it's your turn.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. This is Subramanian Srinivas, a 8th grade student from Z.P.H.S School, Ilavaram. I would like to ask a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Sure.
What is your approach to deal with students whose mother tongue is not English?
So we have many students who do not speak English as a home language. Usually the first question I need to ask them is, are they able to read and write in their home language? Because it's much easier to learn to read in English if you already know how to read in your home language. And it's much more difficult to learn how to read in English if you do not know how to read in your home language. So the first thing I want to know is about their literacy level. I also want to know if, for example, do they listen to any English music? Do they watch any English movies? So I would ask those questions first.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Radhika, would you like to ask the question?
Yes, sir. Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm fine. How are you?
I am also fine, ma'am. This is Radhika. I am a 7th grader from G.P.H.S Ilavaram. Can I ask you a question, ma'am?
Of course.
Which one is best teaching strategy to deal with non-native speakers? Grammar translation method or a direct method?
So we don't really like grammar translation method anymore because our goal is that students are able to use the language for real life. And grammar translation is a good method if all you want to do is translate books or translate text. But if you want to go out into the world and talk to people like we're talking now, or if you want to do business in English, then grammar translation is not quite effective. Direct method can be effective in some cases for learning something like grammar or vocabulary, but we really want to get students talking to each other.
Okay,
So
thank
we
you.
really want communicative method.
Yes. Dr. Lina, see that these days, 21st century, in this era of technology, in this era of globalization, in this era of communication. So would you like to suggest a few qualities that the upcoming English teachers should imbibe to cope up with this all these new trends? So which qualities you suggest the upcoming English teachers should imbibe?
So if you're going to be an English teacher in the next 10 years or 15 years, you really must understand technology. You have to understand how to use technology to be more communicative, like the Zoom meeting that we're using now is wonderful because it allows students from all over different places to come together to chat. You have to know different online technologies. You have to know how to be able to engage people online, to play games, to prepare presentations that are more interactive, not just a lecture, but a presentation that can actually, that your students can participate in. And that means that you have to learn a lot of technology.
Yes. Okay. So you have been following our conversation, our English. What do you say about our English? We have been communicating with many foreign teachers and educators across the globe for many years from now. So what do you think about our accent and our communications, especially my students?
Your students are doing quite well. I
Yeah.
can understand them fine. I hope they can understand me. They speak very clearly. There's not a lot of dialect variation in
Yeah.
their speech,
Mm.
which sometimes, as in India, as in other countries, they develop their own idioms, they develop their own metaphors that other English speakers might not be familiar with.
Yes.
So I think they've done an excellent job.
Yeah, thank you. Sai Nagastri, would you like to interact with a professor? Sai Nagastri?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Hello, ma'am. I am Sai Nagastri. I am an 8th grader from Z.P.H.S School, Ilavaram. I would like to pose you a question, can I?
Yes, of course.
How do we impress our students in classroom?
So I will go back to engaging students in something that they want to talk about. So 7th and 8th graders in the United States now, many want to talk about the Marvel superheroes. They want to talk about Spider-Man and Superman and all of these things. They want to talk about what clothing they want to buy the next time they have some money, what sports teams are doing. So we will engage them. Like, for example, we will pretend that they have so much money to purchase clothing. So what clothing would they purchase? And by doing that, we can combine English language with something like mathematics or science. So anything that they actually want to talk about.
Okay, thank you. Meghana, would you like to interact with ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Hello, ma'am. This is Meghana, an 8th grader from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. Here, my question is, what are the latest trends in teaching English language?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Right now, the latest trend is allowing students to use their home language to talk about very complex topics and then use their home language as a connection to English. So if I'm talking in a class about, maybe I'm talking about typhoons or sharks, and maybe some of my students don't understand all the vocabulary. So I would put them in a group and I would say, okay, I want you to use your home language to talk about this topic, to build your understanding, and then we're going to talk about it in English. So right now, I think that is the latest trend, is really connections between students' home language that they have information in, and using that to connect to English to improve their vocabulary and their understanding.
Okay, thank you. Sai Surya, would you like to pose your question?
Yes, sir. Hello, ma'am. I am Sai Surya, an 8th grade of Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. Here, my question is, what do you think are the most important skills for a good English teacher?
A good English teacher has to be able to motivate their students. A good English teacher has to be able to say, I don't know, but I will find out. Because many times students like yourself will ask questions and the teacher doesn't know the answer. So a good teacher will say, that is an excellent question, and tomorrow I will tell you the answer. So,
How are you, ma'am?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm also fine, ma'am. This is Mamata. I'm a 7th grader. I'm from Z.P.H.S School, Ilavaram. Can I ask one question, ma'am?
Of course.
Could you please tell us about your inspiring story?
So I have been a teacher for many years. So many of my students have done things that are amazing and wonderful, but I think probably one of my students started off as his family was quite poor. They moved to the United States, and his family picked fruit in the field. They were not farmers, they were helpers in the farm. And because of that, they moved all the time. They moved quite a bit. They never stayed in the same place for 1 year. So when this student got to your age, his family decided to leave him with a family friend in one town so that he did not have to move anymore. And he went to school, but he missed his family very much. But he went to school, and then he graduated and he went to college, and now he is a dentist. And his family and we are all so proud of him, because he started off very poor with very few opportunities, but he worked very hard, and with a lot of help from many people, he is now quite successful and taking care of his family.
Wow, that's really a great, inspiring story. So, Doctor, I have gone through your story also. Your grandparents immigrated to U.S.A. from Greece all the way. And after that, I came to know the fact that you didn't want to be a teacher, but the things and the conditions, in fact, forced you to be a teacher. Now you are able to speak Greece, and you are able to speak the Spanish language. Of course, English is the native language. So here my question is, many people here in this part of India, they emphasize the need for developing the what we call it, the accent of American language, the accent of British. So they are always emphasizing the need for developing the accents. Do you think that is developing accent is really important for communication, or communication like this? In fact, I'm not able to speak as like a British, or I'm not able to speak as like a Native American, but still you are able to understand me, but still I am able to understand you. So what do you say about these things that the people here and maybe somewhere in the world who emphasize and who stress the need for developing the accent? Do you think that the accent is that much important?
I think that accent is important, but not for the reasons that many people think accent is important. It is obviously important that we can speak and understand each other. However, in order to emphasize something, maybe I might change my grammar, or maybe I might change my accent. For example, and I will give you an example. If I am speaking with somebody and I want to joke around, or if I want to emphasize something, if I'm telling a story, maybe I will assume a different accent to make the story more interesting. Or I will, if I am getting upset with my children, maybe if I'm telling my children to pick up their clothes, I might say, you better pick those up right now or you ain't gonna like what happens next. So I am intentionally changing my accent, I'm intentionally changing my grammar, but it's not necessarily because I need to adhere to a standard.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Roshni, an 8th grader from Z.P.H.S School, Ilavaram. How does a teacher personality affect their success?
So in order to be an English teacher, in order to be a teacher in any situation, you have to like working with children, and you have to be very flexible. And because many times you start a lesson and then for some reason you have to change the lesson. So you have to be quite flexible, and you must be very willing to change anything at the last minute.
Thank
So
you.
in India, actually, I am working in a rural school where students are not supposed to speak English. We can't expect them to speak English. So all the students, they are supposed to speak their mother tongue. That means my regional language. They are so comfortable in using my mother tongue. But within the 40 minutes, I try to create an environment and where my students can pick something from me, at least to try to speak English. But rest of all the classes where the teachers, they don't use that much language as much as I use. So in this context, as a teacher of English language, what would you suggest me to implement any more speaking practices where my students can be involved and can train themselves to speak more English. As I have told you that at home they speak with their parents in their regional language, and with their friends they speak the same regional language, and even in the school also they use the same language. So would you like to suggest to me any ways where I can involve my students, where my students can little try their best to learn the language, at least speaking in perspective. And here in this classroom, there are a few students, and they attend these classes almost every day. But many students are still out of these sessions. So, what would you suggest me?
I was recently in Nepal visiting with some high school students. And I asked them what they were doing with English. I asked them how English was in their lives. And some of them raised their hand and they said, well, we've read this book, or we read this book, and a few students. And then I asked them, how many of you ever listened to Taylor Swift? And every student raised their hand. And I told the teachers that I was working with, I said, and these were high school students, yes,
Okay.
so older.
Okay.
And I said, how many of you have an Instagram account? And all of the students raised their hand. And so I told the teachers, I said, this is how you get them to practice their English. You start off with something that they are already doing. They are already online. They are already using social media. They are already using Snapchat. Many of them using a combination of their native language and English. They're already listening to English music. So this is the easiest way to expand their English knowledge informally.
And do you think that these kind of interactions with the professors like you and great educators like you can help my students to improve their communicative skills? Because through these interactions, they can listen to your accent and they can pick up your pronunciation, and they can try their the same intonation. So do you think that these kind of interactions can be helpful to the students to master the language?
I think what the benefit of these types of interactions is they reduce your students' anxiety about speaking the language with other people. So, for example, if I were to come to India one day, maybe I would see one of your students in a restaurant or a place, and maybe they would not be so hesitant to approach a Westerner or a British person. So I think that these types of interactions help their willingness to use the language.
Yes, thank you. And here is my last question. And if you suggest any curriculum specially designed for the English subject and meant for the English students, meant for the students whose native language is not English, and for example, in Indian context, which curriculum you would like to suggest to be incorporated in our education system? What kind of system you recommend?
There are several curricula that are very good. One of my favorites is National Geographic curriculum. They've done an excellent job of developing different types of units that all include discussions and things like that. Unfortunately, their curriculum is also very expensive. So, so when you talk about curriculum, it's a balance between the cost of the curriculum and the effectiveness. National Geographic is very engaging. Their materials are quite nice, but it's expensive. More and more, there are more online materials that are available at a lower cost. So there are also Penguin readers, which are quite good, that are leveled for different English proficiency abilities. So anything that is leveled to accommodate different students' English proficiency, I like.
And the Finland education system is world popular. Many Indians back home here, they support the Finland education system. Do you think that Finland education is a system which needs to be followed?
I think that what they're doing in Finland is excellent. They have a very strong tie to social issues within their educational system. I think the difficulty in transferring that outside of Finland is that their educational system is tied to a specific philosophy and culture. And if you do not share that philosophy and culture, then you cannot easily take their educational system elsewhere. They are very dedicated to the welfare of their entire community. And unfortunately, other cultures and other countries do not share that same cultural philosophy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.